It's odd to have such a momentous and such a landmark decision be so predictable because we had that leak. It's sort of strange that this decision, as we have been able to go through it just a little bit, because it just came out moments ago, and we're breaking it down here within moments, really, of it coming out. It's strange that we basically knew exactly what this was going to look like. I'm sure there are tweaks in the final ruling, but in spirit, it seems, at least so far, to be very similar to Alito's leaked majority opinion that we've known about for weeks now. We've covered here extensively for a while. And Ryan, I don't know about you, there have been major Supreme Court decisions that come out every single year, and it's always a rush to sort of go through the document itself, and the country can be sort of struck by a judicial lightning bolt in a moment's notice. In this case, that happened, but we've known pretty much what it would look like for a while. It's odd.
Right. Was it? I think May 2nd was when Politico reported on its leaked draft of the opinion, and going through it so far, it looks like it's fairly consistent with that opinion so far. It is written by Alito. So this is the result of 40 years of right-wing organizing, and I think for many of those 40 years, a lot of the people involved with this movement were not serious. Did not think that
Yes.
this alliance that the kind of Republican establishment had struck with the kind of evangelical conservative movement was actually going to go ahead and catch the car, was actually going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Democrats, in fact, privately, for my entire lifetime up until very recently, were saying Republicans are never going to actually overturn Roe v. Wade. They would never do that. They're not that crazy. Well, no, they did, and they did it. So how did how did Democrats miss this, and how did the Republican establishment kind of lose control of the monster that they created in this lab?
Well, that's a really interesting point. As somebody who would probably be considered part of that monster, I think there are a lot of people over at the
you were in that
RNC.
lab. You were, or not you, because you were too young at the time. But the movement that you're a part of was kind of dragged into the Republican coalition with the promise that we're going to reassert the patriarchy. And this is kind of our kind of proxy fight that we're going to wage over it. And did you believe it, even when you were younger?
No, absolutely not. It's unthinkable. And this is in the Associated Press's copy of their article announcing that Roe was overturned. They say, and this is odd for an Associated Press report, for copy from essentially a Wire report, but they said this was previously basically unthinkable. And I think that's actually right. And what your point is really interesting about the lab monster, because I think there are a whole lot of people, and I said this as soon as that Dobbs argument was made and the justices seemed pretty receptive to it back in the fall. I guarantee you there are a whole lot of people at the RNC right now shaking in their boots. They did not want this to happen. The Republican establishment is not going to be happy about this at all, because we do know that polls find majority of people, even though they aren't super able to define Roe very well and the consequences of it, are not supportive of it being overturned. That said, I think it's also very important to say that thanks to decades of left-wing activism, because of decades of left-wing activism, whether you're thankful for it or not, abortion remains legal and will remain legal in about half of the country. In many, many states, the right will still be there. This decision to overturn Roe is one that, at least legally, a lot of scholars would have believed with, because Roe itself was rooted in this sort of tenuous right to privacy in the 14th Amendment, that it wasn't the argument for abortion being legalized through that right to privacy. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Lawrence Tribe, these people for years have said Roe was always, liberal legal scholars have said Roe was always in danger because the opinion itself was never that sound and was never really rested on sound foundation.
Well, you might have noticed that as the depth and the magnitude of the crises that we're facing as a country and as a planet have gotten larger and larger, the things that we argue about publicly have gotten smaller and smaller. In fact, we're now having a national conversation about the virtues of a drag queen story hour at the local park or the local library. Meanwhile, the major decisions about the shape and the future of the economy are made by other officials explicitly carved out from democratic accountability. And so elected representatives of the people are left to plead their case to the chair of the Federal Reserve to please don't throw millions of people out of work for no reason. And in her exchange with Chairman Jay Powell this week, Elizabeth Warren also got to the heart of what's so disastrously wrong about our approach to inflation. So let's play some of that here.
Thank you, Acting Chairman. I appreciate the help of the Chairman this morning. And thank you for being with us, Chair Powell. So Americans are struggling with rising costs and all eyes turn to the Fed. Last week, you announced that the Fed would raise rates by 0.75 percentage point, the biggest increase in nearly 30 years. So let's talk about what the Fed is and isn't doing when it raises interest rates to try to bring down inflation. Let's start with gas prices. The price of gas is up 40% since Russia invaded Ukraine in February. Chair Powell, will gas prices go down as a result of your interest rate increase?
I would not think so, no.
Okay, so that's a pretty big admission. Gas prices are a pretty big deal. And it's largely gas and other energy prices that has people getting crushed in this economy. Going from $2 gas to $5 gas is a brutal hit. And it takes energy to make basically everything. So when energy prices go up, prices increase across the board. And Jay Powell, of course, can't do anything to make Saudi Arabia decide to pump more oil if they've decided not to because they're mad at Joe Biden over his criticism of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So Warren then turned to food prices.
So let's look at another necessity, food. Price of groceries is up nearly 12% this year. Americans feel the pinch. No matter how much groceries cost, people still got to eat. Chair Powell, will the Fed's interest rate increases bring food prices down for families?
I wouldn't say so, no.
Okay.
Okay, so the Fed knows that its rate hikes, which could throw millions of people out of work, won't actually lower the price of food or gas, but they're doing it anyway. So Warren and Powell talked about why, and here's some of that.
Rate hikes won't make Vladimir Putin turn his tanks around and leave Ukraine. Rate hikes won't break up monopolies. Rate hikes won't straighten out the supply chain or speed up ships or stop a virus that is still causing lockdowns in some parts of the world.
And that led to this lengthy exchange, which is worth playing in full.
Chair Powell, you said last week that interest rate increases, quote, moderate demand. Can you just explain a little more about what that means?
Sure. So we think about interest rate increases as affecting financial conditions and then the economy through three broad channels, the first of which is interest-sensitive spending. So that's durable goods and automobiles and things like that. So interest rates go up, people's demand for, as a result of higher interest rates, will moderate or decline so that supply and demand can get into better balance. The second channel is just asset prices generally. Interest rates, as they go up, will cause asset prices to moderate across the economy, and people spend a little bit less out of their lower level of wealth. The third channel is the exchange rate, which is really just another asset price, and that just basically as the dollar strengthens. As rates go up, the dollar would strengthen, which would tend to drive.
So I appreciate this, and I do appreciate the explanation. But let me just see if I can just put a little more plain vanilla explanation of what's going on here. If I understand what you've said and what economists are saying across the board is that when you raise interest rate, there's going to be less money to invest, and that is, it's going to dampen business investment. Is that a fair statement?
I think the idea is to moderate demand
to invest
so that it can be in better balance with supply.
Okay.
And
so
the current
it's going to make it more,
demand is well in excess of supply in some areas of our economy.
More expensive to invest, which in turn is going to throw workers out of work. And when they're out of work, they have less money to spend. So I get that rate increases stop companies from spending money to build new plants or to buy new trucks or to hire new people. Right, Chair Powell? When money's more expensive, they're less inclined to do that. I think that's what you just said on asset pricing, right?
Well, in the labor market, you have, as you know, you have a situation where there's a shortage of workers, and there are two job vacancies for every person who's actively looking for work. So part of this is to get the labor market back into balance.
All right, you hear that? Part of this is to get the labor market back into balance. Let's think about that for a moment. The best thing that has come from this economy is what's called a tight labor market. That's when unemployment is unusually low. In that environment, in order to entice enough workers, companies have to raise wages, they have to offer better benefits and working conditions, they can't sexually harass or discriminate against employees with as much ease as they did in the past because workers can leave and get a new job. In our current political economy, elites refer to that situation as out of balance. The balance that they want is one where there are many applicants for every job. And so raising interest rates will make sure there are fewer jobs, which means that if you start getting uppity at work and making crazy demands like better pay or a union, they can get rid of you and easily replace you. And by the way, here's something for the anti-immigration people to think about. If we really do have a labor shortage, as in there really aren't enough people able to do the jobs that we need filled, then there are two ways you can solve that problem. You can bring in more workers, or you can shrink the economy so there are fewer jobs. If you bring in immigrant workers who are ready to fill those jobs and bring them out of the shadows so they don't undercut wages, then you can continue to grow the economy and continue to have low unemployment. If you keep immigrants out, then you have to raise interest rates and slow down the economy. It's a perfect example of cutting off our nose to spite our face. But at least Jay Powell is admitting exactly what's going on here. Workers, he thinks, have too much power, and capital wants to get things back into balance.